Right, well, first up, we're very lucky to have Jules Matthews. So Jules is both a friend and mentor of mine, which I'm very lucky to have. So Jules has got a fascinating and very diverse history across a huge amount of things, from farming to leadership to and various other educational pursuits. Has farmed in lots of different places, and also works as an educator with and coach with Integrity Soils on the side. So she's here today with, I guess, her farming hat on, and farms currently in Whitemans Valley and Upper Hutt. There, I'm sure she'll talk a little bit more about that. And yeah, has just, I guess just in my experience, just has an amazing ability to articulate what she does, and I've just personally learned a huge amount from her in terms of taking, well, I guess her ability to break down quite complex ideas into really simple things and actually talk through what the practical application of those has always really impressed me. So really grateful to have you here, Jules, and we'll welcome you up. I'll get your presentation going and we'll get into it. You have a clicker?
I do.
And you have a presentation?
I do.
And away we go. I'll give you a 15-minute warning. Otherwise, leave you to it.
Good. I know how to work the clicker. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Taranaki te monga, ko Waitara te awa, ko Jules Matthews aho, ngā mihi nui, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Sam and the Quorum Sense team, for the invitation to share this conversation today with you all. It's always really great to be in a room full of interested and active learners. I find that's when I get some of the greatest enlightenment for myself. So thank you for being here. I grew up, you can barely see it, under the peak of Mount Taranaki on a farm out east of Stratford, sheep and beef farm. And my dad was probably a little bit progressive insofar as he turned the farm into a wildlife refuge with forest and bird, and put in innumerable dams. And it was always my vision that I would take over the farm, but I, born in the 60s or end of the 50s, I of course had a brother, and as happened, farms went to your brother. And although at the time it seemed a bit disappointing, that led me to moving overseas, and I lived overseas and farmed overseas for 25 years, so gave me a great lot of opportunity to learn from different perspectives in different countries. And what I think was a real turning point for me was in 1996. I lived in the San Juan Islands and farmed in the San Juan Islands, which is a little group of islands up north of Seattle, and that was when I met Vaughan Jones. And for those of you who know Vaughan Jones, he's a New Zealander and was probably way ahead of his time. He was really interested in looking at not the symptoms but the actual causes of our agricultural system and how to make it work effectively, and certainly from a financial perspective for farmers. And he used to do lots of presentations overseas, and that was when I met Vaughan at a Stockman grass farmer workshop, because even in those days I was a bit of an avid junkie to go to workshops. I really liked learning. And then from there I ended up studying holistic resource management with Washington State University, so that was all based out of Alan Savory's work. It was a 3-year program to look at how they could impact primary producers to really affect change in community for the betterment of community. So that was a pretty good start to my journey. And I just became a student, I think, of whole system thinking and whole system management at that point. I returned to New Zealand in 2006 because I thought, you know, farming in New Zealand was sort of the pinnacle of my career, and if I hadn't made it in New Zealand, I probably would never make it, and discovered I sort of had to take a lot of steps backwards in many ways. And that was when a young farmer I was working with told me I was really great, but I was actually going through life being a bit of a cow, and I should go and do this educational program with Landmark. So that set me off on another journey, and for those of you who know about Landmark Education, it's a personal development educational company to sort of help you get yourself out of the way and see where your blind spots in life are so you can fulfill on those things that are important. So that was really a fundamental turn, and it was during that time I sort of got connected with people like Nicole Masters, which of course things go on from there. So currently I manage in conjunction with Jackie Bray. Jackie, put your hand up. Jackie's a bit shy, but she's learning to get her hand up. And Jackie's the mainstay of what makes things work at Mangarawa Farm. But this is a wee picture from up on the hill. So we basically, has this got a little pointer?
The green line.
Little green one. So it's got a little, that's our boundary down here, along here. These paddocks down here are a lot of peat, and then it comes round. The roads comes up here. So we've got a long, narrow farm. It's nestled in this little valley with a lovely view of the Rumataka Ranges. And the structure of the farm is it's owned by Brian and Matthew Monaghan. They're two young American guys that have invested their money and time in New Zealand and settled in New Zealand with their families. And it's managed, of course, by myself and Jackie. And as Sam said, it's located in the Mangarawa Valley, which, for those of you who don't know, is just through Upper Hutt and over the hill. Used to be a valley that had 37 dairy farms. There are none at this point in time. And the farm we have was also previously a dairy farm. We're currently running sheep and beef, and it's 160 odd hectares. About 22 hectares of that is peat, and that sort of presents me with a bit of a conundrum. Anyone got ideas about managing peat? I'd like to know about them. We've got 64 hectares of some nice flat land and about 50 hectares of hill. And then we're in the process of fencing out a bunch of native and river and things like that. So currently we don't have a huge stocking rate, and I'll get into why not, but we've got about 1,290 stock units. This year we calved at about 93% and our lambing was 142%. The soils are a bit of a mixture, obviously the peat, and then the rest is silt loam and silt clay. And our rainfall's about 1.5 metres, so we don't suffer the same sort of fate that you guys over here do. Our context, and having done all the work I've done, I realise that the context or the way you view things really determines how you think and what actions you take. So we really come from the point of view that we're an integral part of the whole, and that we are not separate from nature, but we are in fact nature itself. So the game we're playing is to build a local food hub in the region, and we also come from the point of view that there's no waste. We're always looking at how are things being recycled through the system rather than used and tossed. We like to question everything, and Jackie will probably tell you sometimes a little bit too much. And I believe in assuming that decisions are wrong. And the reason I come at it like that is if you assume you're wrong, you will monitor and measure. If you assume you're right, you usually turn your back and carry on and then get bitten a bit in the bum, or can be. And also keeping a real awareness of what are those unintended consequences of the decisions you're making and the actions you're taking. So we try and celebrate our failures. You're always going to have some, but that tends to be where our good learning happens. So I think it's really important to create a culture of celebrating those things that don't go well as the ones that do, because that's our access to being on a continuous learning plane. What are our challenges? We have many. That picture there is pretty much what we walked into, and that's just one shot of what the whole farm looked like. We've been there 11 months, so there's still a lot to do. We do deal with a bit of lack of understanding, not just from the owners, they're not farming people, so there's a really big gap to bridge between what they want and what is feasible and practical. I put McDonald's up there because it's few months ago what happened is Jackie was getting a little bit tense about things, and that created a little bit of friction for us. And I called a friend of mine who's very good at helping people communicate well together, and I thought, well, if Jackie could have a space to really communicate what she was dealing with and I could understand what she was dealing with, we could move forward with more ease. And what came out of that was Jackie sharing that, 16 years with brown rig agriculture and many, many years in other very conventional commercial agricultural systems. She knew what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and what to expect as a result. And then here she comes to work with me, and basically she found herself not knowing and really struggling with the not knowing of how to do, when to do, and what to expect. And what I discovered was when you're making these transitions, there's a real need to create certainty in the world of uncertainty. And so we've, put quite a lot of effort into that and put some effort into creating a better framework for us to have those conversations. So I would say to anyone who's wanting to make some of these shifts, that's probably one of the most important pieces you can do. In the physical realm, our infrastructure, as you can see, is quite challenged. So a lot of work to be done there. A beast stock, when we took over the farm, it was just a herd of beef cows. And they probably averaged about 900 kgs. And they had a frame for about 550. So all the ensuing issues that went with that, which was certainly some confirmation and, the issues you have when you carry too much weight. And then some genetic issues with club feet and all sorts of other stuff. We bought sheep last winter, and they came from bulls, so they came from quite sandy country, and we've had quite a few issues with scald and a bit of foot rot, and we're really managing those from a nutritional perspective. I don't mind trimming the odd hoof, but I'd rather the butcher did the main part of that. And then a lack of diversity, and probably a lack of diversity not just in the pastures, but insofar as the other plantings on the farm, and perhaps a lack of diversity in the thinking prior to us, so really trying to build our capability in that sense. And then our last and not less challenges, we live in a very semi-urban population, so our road is pretty much a racetrack for the young boys. Outside our house there's a lot of black rubber, and we've got a long narrow farm, so we have to do a bit of stock moving up and down the road, and that can be fraught with all kinds of dangers. What we're doing, currently we're doing like major fencing and water. Jackie's day is spent doing fencing and water, and then more fencing and water, and we fit everything else in around that. I'm gone quite a lot, so she's often doing it alone. And we have recently just hired some fencers to do a major project up on the hill. Maximising photosynthesis and bricks. For those of you who don't know, a bricks is a reading of the dissolved solids in a plant, so you can assess how well it's photosynthesizing. So that's really the basis of what we're doing, and out of doing that we're really looking to grow our microbial function and nutrient cycling of plants. Increasing aeration in the soil is a really big first step for us, and the utilisation of adaptive grazing model. So that means we are forever assessing and reassessing what we're doing in our grazing rotations. So out of that we're looking to increase rooting depth so we can better utilise what good topsoil we do have and good systems we have, and from that we intend to increase not only our water infiltration capacity but also our water holding capability, so we can build resilience into the system. We're focusing on putting our minerals where they have their greatest impact in return. So we're putting quite a bit of we've got a good mineral program through our livestock, and then we also use a few foliars. We concentrate on fully feeding our stock, and then we're also doing quite a bit of deferred grazing as we go through the year. And again, we come back to our main focus is we're doing all this so we can really build on our opportunity of continuous learning as we learn what this farm has to offer and what we can offer back. So this is our first season here, and I just thought we've had some wins and some losses, and I can't share them all with you, but I thought I'd share this one because it certainly took Jackie way out of her comfort zone, the way we set up our lambing and our rotations. And we did a drift lambing, and we got very quickly into daily moves. We certainly gave our stock long enough to bond well before we started mobbing them up. I think that's imperative. But we got into daily moves, and then often twice daily moves. The quickest rotation we've done on the farm all season is 30 days. Most of the rotations have been much more than that, up 45, 60 days. Our average lamb growth from birth to 5 months was 320 grams a day. And the top end of our lambs were doing 420 grams a day from birth to 5 months. And we put our emphasis was on nutrition, because you can have the best genetics in the world, but epigenetics is the expression of those genetics through your environment. So nutrition's part of that, stress, all those sorts of things, clean water. Free choice minerals are a big part of our program. I've done quite a bit of work to assess what is available through the pastures and what isn't, and then just trying to ensure that until we get those nutrients coming through fully in our pastoral system, that animals have the ability to self-select. So we do a little bit of, animals always have salt, and then we do a mix of things like kelp and selenium, zinc, copper and cobalt, a bit of dolomite and humates, so you can ask all sorts of questions about that as we go. We did give our lambs 2 herbal, an extra S in there, but 2 herbal drenches, and one is a product called Herbal Digestive, and then the other is Rumimate from Steve from BioAg, who's sitting over there, so you can talk to Steve later on today. And both those things, I think, really promote well-being in an animal system. We didn't wean till mid-February, and the only reason we weaned is we wanted to throw the rams out and get a few ewes bred really early, just to catch a few early lambs. And then after we did wean, we gave our ewe lambs one enthelmantic drench, and that was on the 17th of March, and we based that on fecal samples, and I'll talk about that in a second. So one thing our adaptive grazing program really showed up and shone through was an enormous amount of trefoil came through, and I think that had a big part to play in the health and resilience with worm burden during the season. So again, observation has been key all the way through this, and the other thing is I find you've got to trust your gut, because you will question yourself and you will doubt yourself. I do it every day, and I've been playing this game for a long time and I still do it. And then measure. And once you've measured, make sure you re-measure, because your gut will only get you so far. These fecal egg counts we started out, and the first round of egg counts were between 50 and 1,500 strong guile, and we didn't drench them at that point. And then the last egg count was on the 11th of March. The highest number was 3,250. For those of you who know, that's pretty off the charts, and the lowest was 100. That same lamb had 50 nematodryas. And interestingly enough, the lamb on the left is the one with the 3,250 count. So it does make me question some of the measuring and monitoring we do, and I think, again, you've got to do your own observation, because the lamb on the left doesn't look like it needs drenching, and the one on the right certainly does. So for us, open-mindedness is the key. Don't throw anything out, don't make anything wrong, and education and understanding is our access. So this is earlier in the spring, and these sheep were going on to covers that were 35, sometimes 4,000 kgs to the hectare, not what you call good ewe and lamb feed, but those are the growth rates we got out of that kind of feed. So it blew out of the water what I knew, and it certainly, I think, probably blew out of the water what Jackie knew, because she's one of those, has come from that background of, if you're going to have viable lamb feed, it's got to be short. We've done a bit of deferred grazing. Photo on the left is what we went into. This is middle of February. Stocking rate of about 6,000 kgs per hectare. That photo on the right is a month later. So we got some really nice results out of that. And the paddock next door was cut for baleage. And again, these photos are about a month ago. And I did a little bit of testing. So the moisture in the paddock next door was 4%. The moisture in the deferred paddock was 12%. The bricks in the grass on the baleage was 6%, and the deferred paddock was 11%. The worms in the hay paddock was 2%. The worms in the deferred was 32%. And currently, the cover in the baleage paddock is about 2,000 kgs, and the cover in the deferred paddock is sitting around 28. So really significant difference in two paddocks side by side. So our vision is to have a highly profitable, dynamic local food system in 3 years. We like to think we're focusing on our whole system accounting. We're in the process of setting up a market garden. We eventually will do free-range eggs. We're also looking at doing raw milk and a sheep dairy. So we've got quite a few things on the list to tick off. We're also getting our first couple of interns at the end of this month, and we'll be looking to do both market garden and sheep and beef sort of workshops to create that real learning environment for others. And for us, a lot of this, or the driver behind this, other than the intention of the owners, is consumer demand and really looking to create a local food movement. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jules. It was 20 minutes and 10 seconds bang on. It's impressive timing. So what we're going to do is maybe just take a few questions, and what we'll do is if there's any that are very specific to Jules' presentation, we'll take them now. And if they're a bit more general and maybe guys got something to add to that, and park them, we'll bring them back for the panel at that. So Sky, you're catching those. That's awesome. Thank you very much. So any questions off the back of that? That was there was a lot in there, Jules, so you did very well to package it in. Yep.
Excuse my ignorance, but what is treacle?
It's a legume. So it's a legume, and you'll see it out in your pastures. You often see it along the side of the road. It has a little yellow flower. And it's in most of our pastures. It would have been planted years ago, so there's seed everywhere. Yep.
To build on that, are you reseeding anything, or are you just letting the pasture naturally express itself through the grazing management?
We will do a little bit of both. So we have done a little bit of cover cropping this year, and I don't live in a farming community really, so I'd like someone with a drill. I need to talk to Simon, maybe he can send me one. But yeah, so part of it is location and what's actually available to you, but I think I'm really interested in what will come through and what will naturally get expressed. Although we're really well resourced, I'm not that big on just spending money because I've got it available to me. I want to use this farm to be able to facilitate people who don't have the kind of resources that we have available to us as well.
And from your early signs of your bricks levels and stuff like that, you're pretty confident that you're still getting the pasture quality with that?
Well, yeah, and I think you don't get those sort of lamb growth rates on poor quality pasture. There's no way you do. So,
Just to follow on from that, can you talk a little bit about the bricks level over the farm? You had that picture of 11, and is that? Yeah,
we've done a little bit with our foliar feeding, and what I've noticed, there was another little trial I did, and where we hadn't fed was 4, where we hadn't fed was 5, and where we had fed was 11 or 12. So quite often I'm seeing quite a big shift, and then I'll go along the side of the road. The best place to check your bricks is along the side of the road. It's always right up there. makes you feel like you're really like not doing a very good job.
So what sort of readings are you getting on the side of the road?
It depends on the when and where, but 14s, 14, 16. Yeah, that's why your cows love it when you put them on the side of the road. Yes?
Jules, do you mind going back to that slide of the comparison between the other farm and your farm? That one, yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
So those are two side-by-side paddocks.
Oh, but one was a different farmer?
One was cut for baleage and the other had deferred grazing.
Right, but both
Yep.
were farms.
Yep.
My question in respect of those items was around transparency around regenerative farming and what can be achieved and what can't be achieved. What's your benchmark, and what are you aiming for in those? So take the second paddock there. What would you think is best practice?
Can you ask that again?
Well, I mean, if you've got moisture of 12%, what are you targeting?
I don't necessarily have a target. This was taken after we had a tiny bit of rain. It was right after you'd come, Steve. So there'd been quite a long period of dry, and then we got a little bit of rain. So I suppose all I'm trying to do is go, if I have these different practices, how can I measure the results that come out of it? And the work that Catherine Tozer's done on deferred grazing, I think is really to the benefit of all of us to have a look at, because that's New Zealand research and it's applicable to all of us.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not being critical by any means.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get an understanding of through different methodology. What is like take the worm count. What is best practice? What should you be kind of targeting?
So what are your goals for? So in this situation in future years, what kind of bricks would you like to see? How many worms would you like to see?
Oh, look, I'd like to have 100 plus worms in a spade full of soil, and I'd like to have bricks up at 18.
Okay.
And I know that and I know that times I might and times I might not. So
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to hit to.
yeah, okay, good. Thanks.
So what's the sort of range of targets you'd like to be aiming for, and what clearly climate and all sorts of other factors, variables, impact on that. What is the range?
And if the world was my oyster, 150, 200 worms and bricks is a 24, I'd be running to the bank.
Just to complete that picture then, what were you working with to start with? What is that we're looking at? When was that planted? What is it?
These are all old established pastures that nothing's been done with for a very long time.
What fescue grasses?
There's a mixture of orchard grasses, ryegrass, plover, trefoil, usual plantains and things like that.
Orchard grass is the American term.
Oh, sorry, cocksfoot, sorry. I'm half American now. Every now and again it slips out, but I don't say, what's that word? Aluminum.
Andre.
Excuse me, Dave, you just touched on foliage. What are you applying?
A mixture of stuff. So I play with it a little bit. So, you're using fish hydrolysates, EMs, a lot of trace minerals, soil and seed, all sorts of things. I like to kind of be the little bit of the mad scientist, really.
No, urea or anything?
I have on the peat, actually. I have used a little bit of liquid urea, yes. So I don't think there's any good or bad or right or wrong. I think it's what's appropriate and how we use it that matters. And I think rather than being positional about those things, I think, again, it's about being open and going, what's the best tool? And it's like when you're ill and dying, maybe antibiotics are not a bad idea. But taking them every day, I think not. So.
Yep.
Just in terms of the previous owners, and not to make anything they've done wrong, but give us a bit of a picture. Do you consider that farm was run down? Was there a lot of fertiliser used previously? Just to give us a picture of what you inherited.
It had been, I think, probably run quite poorly and minimally for quite some time with share milkers. I don't know what they'd put in insofar as fertility. I don't know, but.